Welcome to another episode of our mini podcast, I Built a Company That Makes a Difference by B1. Here we talk to founders of sustainable businesses to get their takes on how and why they started their companies and lessons that they've learned along the way. Today, my guest is Tanya Fletcher-Scott, the founder and CEO of Femdacity, which stands for Feminine Audacity, which I love, and is a line of leak-proof underwear and products. On her website, Tanya says that periods should never hold girls and women back from achieving and doing great things. I love this product so far. I love the website and I love the mission. Tanya, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And I just look forward to a great conversation to talk about one of my favorite subjects.
Wonderful. Okay, so in this conversation, we're going to talk about you. We're going to talk about the conception and rise of Femdacity. We're going to get into a lot of how you built the business, some things that
Mhm.
you did really well, some things that you would not do in the same way if you had to do it over again, or if you could do it over again, and
Okay.
some lessons learned. So a lot of our audience is made up of entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs. So any actionable advice is super, super welcome. But let's start
Absolutely.
this conversation with a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, that's good. I first of all, when I learned about B1 and the podcast, I just thought, wow, what an innovative idea because sustainability is not sexy, right? The topic of it, even though there's a greater mission. So it was really great to just hear about this. So I actually have my degree from undergrad is in chemical engineering and with an environmental focus. So that's always been, I've kind of always geeked out about, environmental and, just understood, water and waste management and, recognize that there's, bigger opportunities. But, fast forwarding to the last few years, I'm a mom of girls. And as menstruators, we tend to cycle all at the same time, and mom is always the one who's left holding the bag with no products. And, as an engineer, I recognize that why are we, that basically periods and period management hasn't changed much through the decades. And that, there's got to be a more convenient, sustainable option out there. So, that's kind of where this whole idea came from. And, coincident with that, I learned about this whole idea of period poverty, which I never even recognized was a thing. That in some parts of the world, girls don't go to school. Here in the States, women may not go to work, depending on their flow. So it's a thing, and there are families out there who have to make a decision about buying food versus buying hygiene products, right? And so when you think about it, it really begs the question: why aren't we using something, or why aren't more sustainable, reusable options available? So that's kind of where it all started. And I was in that generation that took sewing classes back in home
So was I.
economics. Yes, so I mean that doesn't really exist anymore. And I came up with the idea of, hey, let me try to sew some options. And I went through a whole bunch of very ugly prototypes. Actually, my first prototype. At some point, I'm going to be brave enough to take a picture of it and post it on my website as inspiration. But it's a very ugly version, and I think I cried a whole lot. Like, this is never going to happen. But I keep that hanging up in my workshop just as a reminder and inspiration of resilience and how far you can go. So again, fast forward, I came up with a whole bunch of different prototypes, found a prototyping company that could help me to manufacture, and then eventually found a manufacturer. So that's kind of how all of this started. It was like I just embraced the whole idea of, hey, why not? Let's try it. Let's try it. Let's try it. So that's the production, and then just marketing it. And my daughters really were the first guinea pigs and their friends. So I would give it away to them. Some of the moms said, hey, I'd buy it. And I started off with a really low price point, got a lot of feedback like, hey, we need more coverage here, or it's a little too bulky here, or use different materials. So that was really helpful, having guinea pigs and folks who are able to help. I found that people in general just really want to help you. They
I
get
like that.
inspired by your vision if you're courageous enough to share it, and they want to help any kind of way.
Okay. I've got a lot. I've written down about 7 questions
Sorry.
already. But let's start with plug your school. What school did you go to study
Yeah.
engineering?
So I am a Rutgers University Scarlet Knight graduate.
Okay.
So that's the State University of New Jersey, for all the Rutgers folks out there. So yeah, are you?
Are you sitting in New Jersey right now?
No, actually, I am in the state of Georgia. So I've traded in that for being a peach.
Nice. All right. So how many daughters do you have and how old are they?
So let's see. At the time, my daughter. So I have one who's grown up and doing her life, and she's about 30. She's my bonus kid. I have a 20-year-old now who's in university, and we have one left who's home. She's 18. So at the time, they were still teenagers. One a little bit older. They were teenagers and definitely inspiration for this product.
Amazing. Okay. And just for anybody who doesn't know, so it can be
Mhm.
women, girls, or also non-menstruating folks that are listening in. Can you just level set for us what is period poverty? Um,
Yeah,
and as you were on this journey, this is like a two-part question, which I'm going to do a lot. I'm
yeah.
sorry. First, what is it? Let's just level set on the definition of what it is. And then on the journey of learning more about it, what totally shocked you? Like you ran across some facts and you were like, oh my gosh, this is happening today in the world. What were some things,
Yeah.
if you can remember anything like that?
Oh, I actually remember it, and I have it actually started with a New York Times article. And that was I remember it was 2018, and I still have that article. So, and believe it or not, I was vacationing in Europe, and I found that New York Times article. So I had to learn about it in a whole different other country. But reading the New York Times, and there's this article about period shaming. I believe it was in Nepal, and just kind of some of the customs or around girls and women who are menstruating. And a lot of the customs are that, hey, if you're on your period, you can't be in the home, right? Because bad luck will happen to the home. So a lot of the girls would have to sleep in huts or caves, and they were exposed to the elements, animals. Many of them got hurt and maimed. And so it just, as I read the article, I said, this is just ridiculous. This happens. But then it piqued my interest. So I remember getting back home and doing a whole bunch of Google searches. And then that's when I learned, oh, okay, yes, that happens there. But here in the States, here in, the quote unquote first world, you have a version of period poverty that happens with folks who are low income. And essentially what period poverty is the inability to afford products, menstrual hygiene products. And so, as I mentioned earlier in the intro, many families have to decide, make a decision as to whether they're going to put food on the table, buy groceries for the week, and are they going to buy disposable products, right? So you think about that. If I can't buy a disposable product and I have to go to school, I'm not going to school that week. Or maybe I'm missing a few days, or if I'm a heavy menstruator, maybe I'm not going to go to work during my heavy days. So does that make me a quote unquote reliable employee, somebody who's dependable? Maybe I'm perceived as a slacker, and who wants to tell their boss I can't afford, or I'm bleeding heavy, especially if it's a man. And my the because I came up in the engineering, corporate, most of, not only my bosses, but peers have been men. So who wants to talk about that, right? To their peers. So that's what essentially period poverty is. It's just the inability. And again, as an engineer, to me, it just felt like, wow, well, reusables are the solution. And in many parts of the world, reusables are actually an embraced solution. Cups are, particularly in some countries in Africa, cups are disseminated. There are campaigns to make pads and stuff like that. So I would say they're very forward thinking, there, not so much in the first world.
So can you talk a little bit about, well, one, I'll just react and say it just blows my mind. Because I first was introduced to that concept of period poverty when I saw an ad on social media that was like sponsor whatever this young girl, because
Yep.
exactly like you said, she's being cast out of her home when she's menstruating and her family can't afford period products. And it just never, it just never occurred to me until my adult years that, oh my life, young girls and women are having this experience, and it's something that starts when you're so long and lasting. It's such a percentage of your life.
Exactly.
My
And
God.
it's think about it. So it's because I can remember when I started, and I think most women or administrators remember that when you start, it's I don't want to call it traumatic, but it's life changing.
Oh
And
yeah.
like I grew up with my brothers, and I remember almost feeling like I couldn't play with them anymore.
Right.
Right. So you just feel like it's definitely like your life changes and you're different. And of course, it is a beautiful thing, right? It means you're growing up and able to, bear children and all of that. So that part is very beautiful, but it's it also is it could be traumatic for girls, especially if you have a bad experience with it.
Well, also, especially if you come from a culture or a subculture, sometimes when girls get their period or menstruators get their period, it's celebrated. Sometimes it's like, oh, good Lord, this is the end, right? So it depends on what kind of culture and subculture you come from.
This
I
is true.
remember in my case, I was like, oh my God, this is the end. It wasn't so much my culture, but just thinking, this is incredibly inconvenient now. This is
That's
incredibly
right.
inconvenient.
Yes.
Um, and
Yes.
just on that point, so in building this business, can you talk a little bit about your experience talking about this product and this subject? Because
Oh my gosh.
yeah, how do people react?
Oh
This is
my
not
gosh.
a subject that's just kind of out there. So even now, so what has your experience been building this
Well,
business and talking about this subject?
it's been a journey, okay? Because my husband, poor guy. I mean, he's probably the bravest man I know. And he goes, "Do you have to say periods?" Like and so I'm sensitive to that. Is that's the hearing it, right? And how do you socialize it, which is kind of how we went through many versions of how to socialize and even branding it,
Yeah,
because the product did start out as a period panty.
right?
And then, I was introduced to different markets and different needs. And I said, oh, okay, well, maybe I need to call it a leak proof panty. And actually, that's a bit more delicate to
Right,
say.
right.
And then even menstrual hygiene. So believe me, it has been a 3 4 year journey of finding the right words. And like you said, I mean, regardless of the words, there's still a bit of an ick factor that I have to manage around. But that's kind of why we've landed on leak proof panty or menstrual hygiene products or hygiene products, because it helps people to digest it. Yeah.
So even yeah, gosh, the language of how you talk about the product is to have to be really evolved from this to what it is today. And I
Yes.
forgot to even ask you, how old is this company? When did you start?
So I started in so the company was officially registered in 2019, because I just
Okay.
knew I'm going to do this, but I had no problem. just knew. I just had my ugly prototype. And so 2019 was when I officially registered. But honestly, I didn't launch until 2021.
Ooh, right in the pandemic then.
Right in the pandemic. There you go. Yeah. Well, and that also is, the challenges of a manufacturing process in a pandemic because lots of challenges there. So, and just the fashion industry in general, which that's I don't know if we have time to talk about that, but that the challenges with that.
Right.
But yes, so yes, registered in 2019, but launched in 2021.
And then talk to us about, and when I say us, I mean the whole audience. I'm pretending like there's
Yes.
several of me here, but talk to me about um, your prototype. So when you were like, all
All
right,
that
I'm
prototype.
gonna dust off my sewing machine, go grab some material. Like, how was that? Were you looking for a specific thing? Did you know, or you just like, you know what, I'm gonna try it. This one's gonna be bad. I'm gonna try it, and it's gonna get better.
Well, at first, so what I was thinking at first was I was actually going down a pad road. And I even bought a few on the internet. I thought, oh, this would be good. But I really didn't like the cloth pads that were out there at the time. They kind of, moved about a little too freely and didn't feel very secure.
Right.
So I said, okay, I think a panty is the solution.
Mhm.
And what I did is I think I went to YouTube. So good old YouTube. I went to YouTube and I probably Googled a bunch of home sewers who
Mhm.
sell patterns.
Yeah.
And I went old school. I bought a pattern
Uh-huh.
and downloaded the pattern and actually, made my first panty. So
Uh-huh.
I cut it, laid fabric, cut it, bought my fabric from the fabric store, retail, just, kind of dusted off the sewing machine, like you said.
Mhm.
And what I thought were different. Oh, finding the right absorbency, the absorbent material. That was crazy. I went from socks to washcloths to towels, all kind of different things, right? So, I mean, I had versions of the panty that were like 6 inches thick versus, because I had to reconcile comfort versus absorbency, right? So there was
Right.
that whole struggle there. But yes, that first version, it had absorbency, but I struggled with the elastic and being
Okay.
able to sew that. I think I probably got an F on that in my sewing class. But so
All
it's pretty
right.
ugly.
So you did, and then how, I know things like this are constantly being refined because it's as much technology as it is fashion. So
Yes.
how long did it take you to get to a prototype or a version that you felt like, okay, I'm going to commercialize this for real outside of my kind of circle of testers, my daughters and their friends, and
Yeah.
beta testers or alpha testers. How long did it take you to get to a version that you were like, I can commercialize this now?
Well, what I realized was so the pattern that I had for just a regular panty, and it was a regular brief panty, had 3 parts. So there was the front, the back, and what's called the gusset, which is
Hmm.
that crotch area. And there's the band, but the band is elastic. So that was the basic style of the panty. But what I learned with a lot of research, and again, the University of YouTube,
Hmm.
is that when you go to manufacturer, your price is also contingent on how many pieces are cut for you. So what I realized is I needed to make this design more simpler. So I actually redesigned the pattern to make it actually 2 pieces. So just one continuous panty and then just the gusset. So the gusset that supported the absorbent pad.
Right.
And that actually made it. And when I went to the prototyper, they were like, "This is really smart that you did that." I was like, "Oh, I was just spitballing." So
Was this like a little bit of your engineering background that was coming into the fold?
there you go. I was like, "Hey, this is what you do. You get scrappy with that kind of thing." So yeah, the prototyper, she loved it. She was like, "Yeah, this is really smart. I love this." And what's great about going to a prototyper is they lean in with with their experience.
Right.
So what they said is, what I was the type of elastic I was using. They said, for what you're trying to do, I would use a different type of elastic. I would use a knitted type of elastic, and I would use this width. And I would go with a different absorbent material because I was using a pretty thick polyurethane laminate layer, which is like a plastic. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's a plastic, very thin plastic material. Think like a raincoat or rain
Right.
jacket.
Right.
That very thin, a waterproof material. So I was using a thick one, and she's like, "No, I would go with a thinner." So it was great getting their experience. And they made a prototype for me, a manufacturable prototype. And oh my gosh, when I got it, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like a real business. So
That's so for everybody who's looking to create a D2C product, a B2C product, how
yeah,
did you find your prototyper? And at what stage did you realize in the process, oh, this is the next step that I need to get a
yeah.
prototyper? And how did you find one, especially in the pandemic?
Well, I will say I went through a couple of prototypers because I'm glad you keep bringing up the pandemic because, um, well, to directly answer your question, I realized I needed to understand the manufacturing process
Mm,
more. So I took a class. I found a class online, and it was basically, hey, how to bring your material or your idea to market. And they walk you through just the design phases, the design phase, the prototype phase, finding your manufacturer, going to market. And I actually got a lot of education. And in that class, you tour a cut and sew. That's a manufacturing facility. You tour a cut and sew facility, and they partner you up. And what I found is if you're looking to bring a brand to or a design to market, if you reach out to a prototyper or a manufacturer, they probably won't return your call because you're seen as probably high risk. They're looking to ensure that their lines are always running. And so
right.
they don't want a fly by night company to work with. And they want someone who understands the business and who can understand the minimum requirements and the cost and all of that stuff. Well, those classes will through all of that. So at least your eyes wide open, you've been educated, you understand what's required of you. And what they did, they're kind of a third party, so they partner you up with good facilities. And I'm glad I went through it because I realized that not all cut and sew facilities are the same, meaning if you deal with a high volume one, they want you to produce 10,000, 20,000, and you're
Right.
mortgaging your house to
Mm,
to afford that, right?
mm-hmm.
um, versus there are smaller ones who tailor and work with new designers.
Mm-hmm.
And also they're because they're not a big facility, they're okay with smaller minimums, like a production run of 100 units. And that was my
Okay.
production run, was 100. My first run was 100 units. So they're okay with that, and they're used to working with you. And then also for the material that I had, it is a stretchable cotton lycra material, and versus a manufacturer that does denim jeans, right?
Mm,
And so you got to know how to work with stretchable material. So it actually helped me to realize that there was value in getting educated and spending the money, investing the money, I should say, to
right.
understand the business that I'm looking to get into.
And did you enjoy your course well enough to plug the name here for our listeners?
I'm going to find it for you because I want
Okay.
to make sure. And I loved it. It was in North Carolina.
Okay.
And I flew up there. I mean, because I thought this is worth the investment.
We'll
But
put
I
that in
will
the
give
show
you,
notes.
yes, I will give you the information. It was wonderful. I mean,
Okay.
and I will say we were the last class before the pandemic. So
Right.
our
Okay.
class
Lucky.
was in the March 2020. Yes, it was March 2020
Wow.
before the world shut down. Yeah.
All right. So then in your particular journey, we talked to a lot of entrepreneurs who are like, look, this was a habit, not a habit, a hobby for me. And then at some point, I needed to make a transition because I wanted this thing to grow and it was terribly scary. Some other entrepreneur guests that we talked to are like, I was all in from the beginning. I, mortgaged my house or I remortgaged my house or I put my savings into it or I got a personal loan, whatever it was. What was your journey? Was it a transition to full time? Or was it like, you know what, I'm all in from the beginning?
So I had one of those high powered corporate jobs, and it made it very, so this was a passion project that I knew would be big, but it's a baby, right? So the baby, you've got to nurture it along the way, and take it slow and be patient with it. But so I recognized that I needed an exit strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually, at the time, I was working with a business coach through university. In the middle of all of this, I was getting an MBA. So
Oh my gosh.
it was crazy. It was crazy. So in the middle of all of this, I'm getting an MBA because initially I wanted to climb the corporate ladder and be in the C-suite. And
Wait, let me just recap. So you were doing an MBA, you had a corporate job, and at that time you had two teenage girls at home and you wanted to start a side business.
yes,
All
and then
right.
there was a
All right.
pandemic.
And there
Yes,
was a
with social
pandemic.
unrest and all of that, right?
Yeah. All right. This is just a little
Crazy.
window into Tanya's personality.
Yes, 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 yes. Tanya has slowed down now. Okay, yeah. So I would not advise that because it actually led to burnout. So that was my door to this.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I was getting my MBA, and through that program, I had a coach, and my coach was helping me work through an exit strategy, and I had a 2-year exit strategy. I said, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm going to step down. I engaged my boss on my exit strategy. He's awesome. I mean, we're still friends today, uh, but we worked through what that would look like. And then, as life would have it, that exit strategy fast forwarded, I would say, maybe a year, maybe even less than a year. Just things changed at the job, and I was getting more and more disenchanted with that corporate life and burnt out. I'm sure it was the pandemic. It was the pandemic soup that we were all living.
Mm-hmm.
So the challenges with that, and personal challenges. And I just realized I just don't want to do this anymore. But I really want to do that. That can't support me. So I transitioned into a freelance,
Mm-hmm.
work life.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm still kind of doing the corporate engineering quality thing, and I'm a freelancer, which allows me to have time to work on this business.
And I love what you said at the top of this response, which is, I knew it was going to be big. Talk to us again, us, me, whatever, all of us.
Yeah.
Talk to us because I'm also an entrepreneur. So I would love to bottle some of that confidence or
Yeah.
self-belief or belief in your venture, your project, because that is, I mean, we talk a lot on this podcast about how entrepreneurship is a journey that is very, very difficult to articulate, especially,
Yeah.
well, particularly to people who've never done it before. Even if you've got a very, very stressful job, if you're in a corporate or, a medium-sized business, even a small business, unless you've been somewhere on an entrepreneurial journey, it's really hard to articulate. So I love what you just said. How did you get there? Is this part of your personality to just be exceptionally positive about this? Is this something that was learned? Is this like how can we all of the entrepreneurs listening to this bottle some of that for ourselves?
Well, I believe in the product, and I believe that there's a need for it. And every time I have a conversation with someone, a serious conversation with them, they're like, "Oh." Like you could just see the light go off like, "Oh, this is good. Oh, this is so needed." And um and that's what keeps me. I mean, there are times, right? Because I have my business friends, and we all kind of commiserate with each other when we're having those tough times. But I get reinforced when I talk to people about it that this is so needed. And I mean, there's nothing like, guys, getting that first customer that's not friends and family, right?
Yes, that is, yes. And that's also just that is hard to articulate to people when you're like, somebody paid $2 for my thing and what that means.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And what was difficult, I will say, particularly for me, because I had that quote unquote good job, right? With all the, the wonderful benefits and the, just the title and all of the good stuff. That is very difficult to articulate because people think you're crazy. Like, you're walking away from that to do this.
Mhm. Those
And
benefits, your pension, your
the
what's
benefit,
going to happen to your 401k? Yes, yes, I've had those conversations too.
that's it. And you have to believe in yourself and surround yourself with other people. And I will say, it's not that folks are looking to sabotage you. They care. They're just, they don't have the same vision that you have. And but I will say, for me, my family, and I was thinking about this morning, is they have always, they are team, like, we are here to support you. We see this, we think it's amazing, and keep going, keep going.
Oh,
So
they must be so proud of you. Can you
it's
talk to,
wonderful. It's
that
wonderful.
is wonderful. Can you
Yeah.
talk to folks a little bit about, um, I don't want to say how important because it's, that's a weird thing to qualify and measure how
Mhm.
important having an infrastructure is in a support system, but how you can create a support system also around you.
Yeah.
If you're like, okay, I'm about to leave my job, my my friends think I'm nuts, my professional contacts don't understand. Like, how do you look for, create, and build a support system and an infrastructure, a support infrastructure around you?
So I journal a lot. I vision a lot. I've got my little, you can't see it, but I've got my little vision board
Oh,
here.
yes. Yeah. She's
You
holding
can't
that
see
up.
it.
Yep. It's got
So
sticky notes on it
visioning
and
helps.
everything.
Yes, visioning helps to, visualize just kind of where do you want to be? What do you want your life to look like? Um, and then, like I said, my family, it took them a while to understand the business, to understand where I'm going with it, and and actually it was difficult for me to articulate, to be honest with you. But they knew that, okay, what the life I was living was not sustainable. I was probably not very nice. No, I'm just going to say I wasn't very nice. Difficult to get along with, short, tired, stressed, burnt out. They knew that that had to change. And, they just said, okay, yeah, freelancing, if you want to do that, fine. And okay, yeah, do that business. But I will say, you've got to convince yourself first that this
Mm.
is this is your business, and demonstrate with your actions and your commitment, as opposed to just saying, I have a business and I want you to support it. And you've got to demonstrate that you have a passion for it. That's first. And then finding that community of folks, because this entrepreneur journey I think it's for crazy people. So you've got to be mentally prepared for that. And there's a small community out there of folks who are following that journey. And I'm lucky enough that, or I should say, blessed enough that I've got two friends from undergrad who are pursuing. One is doing it full time, one's doing it part time, and we meet virtually every 2 weeks and just talk about where we are.
There are few, again, back to that. I have two co-founders, luckily for me and my personality type. Luckily, I have two co-founders, and very often we're on calls and there are only two other people that know what is going on at that
Yes.
particular moment, or another entrepreneur. Even my husband, sometimes I'm like, how do I explain this? Or I don't have the mental bandwidth to explain this. But if I get on
Exactly.
the phone with another entrepreneur and I'm like, this is the situation, and they're like, girl, yeah, I know. Yeah,
Yeah.
I get it.
And I think for, my my partner, he doesn't want to be my business partner. I mean, he cares about me, but I don't want to he doesn't want to hear about Femdacity all the time. Right. So somebody else needs to take that. So I can have meaningful conversation about life with him.
And that's another thing. I really like, so I'm based in London. I really
Mhm.
like and have been so happy and pleased and surprised about the startup founder and operator leadership community that
Mhm.
exists, because
Mhm.
there are some folks who, just like in life, there's some folks who don't have time to help,
Yep.
and that's not their MO either. But
Yep.
overall, there is a huge percentage of folks that are on this journey that are happy to help, happy to pass on
Yes.
some wisdom, and happy to pass on contacts. Um,
Yes.
that's been an amazingly eye-opening, which was completely different from when I was working in the corporate world. It's
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
so heartwarming.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Definitely. They're out there. You just have to um and I would say for someone transitioning like I did, that was challenging because I had already established myself as an expert in the field I was in, and I had my contacts and the whole LinkedIn thing, not lockdown, right? And then it's like, oh, there's this passion business, this thing she's doing with panties over here, right? So
That's not quite engineering.
yeah, that's not. And what are you doing? And it took a while for me to update my LinkedIn profile with that, just because I felt like I had, established that, and so that took time to build that community and to step out there. But when I did that, I recognized that, oh, well, there are folks out there who want to support, want to cheer, want to help. Yeah.
So, can you talk to us about that first year, I would say, of business, setting up um, acquisition channels, finding customers? You were e-commerce from the beginning.
Yes.
How did that go? How did you, with like digital marketing and e-commerce? That's a whole other. This is a
Oh,
métier in and of itself, and there's so many different facets. You could specialize in one specific facet of community management, right? And do that for
yes.
half of your career. So how did you approach,
Yeah.
online sales?
Well, I had the website because to me, it's an online catalog. It's a way of, here are my wares, here's the description of the product, here's about me. So it's kind of like almost an extension of your business card,
Mhm.
right? So folks can learn about you, stumble upon you. Yeah, if you want to order, that's great, right? So I started with the website. I also did some blog posts because, again, it took quite a while for me to launch. And so, in order to kind of develop some engagement, get a social presence, um, begin to build an email list, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. I had to provide something, right?
Mhm.
Something that
Mhm.
wasn't a product. And so I started doing, with blog posts, and really I just started sharing my story. I started sharing, hey, I learned about this thing called period poverty. Here's the cover of the New York Times article that I read about. Hey, guess what? It happens in this country. And hey, there's a whole other, I guess, subculture, as you say, around period poverty. And, we don't think about, how do homeless people deal with, their periods? How do people in prison deal with it? I mean, on college campuses, there's this whole topic that needed to be discussed. So I talked about that. Pushing the whole idea of reusables. Definitely Earth Day talked about, and I continue to talk about, even beyond Earth Day, just the environmental impact of
Huge,
disposable products,
tremendous,
which are
yeah.
it's huge, eye opening. But yeah, so I started with that, with the blog post, and I used that. So So the blog posts live on my website, but I also put um, socialized it on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. So those are kind of my main. Not so quite ready with Threads yet. I don't know what to do about Threads, but not sure about that. But um, those are the sites that I push content through. And I did that for a while and really just getting the word out as much as I can. And I would say if I had to do, and I know we'll get to this a little bit more, if I had to do it over again, I probably would be a little bit more old school and
Interesting.
talk more about it. Like before there was the internet and before there was social, how did people sell? They talked about it and, they built relationships. And I think I would have done a bit more of that,
Hmm.
had a bit more courage to do that.
So then talk to us about the importance of building an email list, because I've been a marketer for most of my life and a communicator, and I have
Yeah.
such strong feelings about that. So I'm glad to hear you bring that up. What was that like?
Well, and I wasn't great at it at first. I would build the email list and then ignore my email list. It's like, what's the point of that? Right. So, um, but it's a way to communicate, it's a way to celebrate. And I had to just get over myself because the first emails I did, oh gosh, it took me hours to write that email. Like I was writing a school paper or something. Nobody wants to read that, right? They just want to know you're out there. A lot of the folks on your email list are probably friends and family at first. They just want to know you're alive, you're doing stuff, cheer you on. And that's fun too, because sometimes you'll get those responses like, hey, keep going. I love this. Right. And so, and you do some promotions. So initially, what I did, because I didn't have a product, is I would just focus on the blog posts and just,
Right.
hey, here's some information. Hey, did you know about this? Did you know about that? Did you know about period poverty? This is what it looks like, in this part of the world or in this subculture, and have a link to my website. And so it was a lot of that. So getting better. I'm not saying I'm all the way there, but it is important to continually develop that email list and to continue to communicate with your audience.
I would tell any entrepreneur out there listening, the email list that you cultivate and that you build up are your proprietary. You own that data. Those subscribers
Mm-hmm.
are yours.
Mm-hmm.
On social media, which is where a lot, especially Instagram, that's where a lot of business is done. That's a hub for a lot of business. You
Yeah.
don't own those. So if
Yep.
you wanted to, it's true that you could communicate with them. Um, not in a mass way, unless it's a broadcast way. So the lists, the contacts that you build, those lists, those databases that you build, those are proprietary to you, and it's really important. I always encourage, and they tend to be more engaged as well. I
Yes.
always encourage entrepreneurs, especially ones starting out, to, you know, build a list, even try it out, right? Because then you also, it's another way to gauge interest. Who's interested in your stuff? So before you
Exactly.
have a product or on the side of a product, you can run campaigns, low dollar campaigns, acquisition
Yep.
to newsletter subscribers, and that's still worth something to you as well. You
I
could,
will
as you said,
say
run promotions, tests,
I
A/B
love it.
tests. Yeah.
And I've been starting the test, and that's been a little fun to play with the
It's been a
tests
little
and
fun.
sending it out different. Yeah, so I've been learning with the tests too. And also I would say I've been doing in-person markets. So now that the world is opened back up, there's a lot more of those weekend markets that are going on. And so I've been doing that locally. And I've learned the art of the email there. It's like, hey, you got the person that you pull in to they're walking past slow and they're looking at you, you make eye contact, you do all of that stuff, and introducing the product, which is, I would say, oh, I love in-person markets because you get to hone your pitch.
And you get to be
Um,
face to face with a
you
potential
get to be
buyer.
face to face. You get amazing feedback from folks. You get to understand maybe their hesitations and things that light them up about. It's like, oh, okay, I got to focus more on that or less on this. But also, if they're not ready to buy, it's like, hey, well, you want to join the email list? And that I rack up.
Yeah,
That is where I build my email list at those
good.
in-person markets because they're
That's
already
perfect.
warm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And you have a
Yeah,
face. That's perfect. That's
yeah,
perfect.
love it.
Well,
Mhm.
we normally end these sessions with some I call yeah, I call them rapid fire. They're really not rapid fire. And the questions are built in a way that makes it not rapid to answer. So I'm
Okay,
just gonna
got
say
it.
six questions.
Air
The
quote rapid fire.
right, air
Okay.
quote unquote rapid. What do your plans look like for the rest of 2023?
So really, it's more in-person markets, and I was just thinking about it because by the time this airs, we'll probably be in Q4. So just building my Q4 plan, which is going to be for the most part um, in-person markets. I'm going to focus on that email list and
Hmm.
really, because I've got a lot of warm folks, and really focus and retargeting folks who've purchased, because I haven't been great about that. Retargeting those folks who have purchased, maybe for gifting ideas. I will also say that I'm looking at some additional channels beyond social. Because believe it or not, although I'm on social, I get very little sales through social. So it's more of just that communication tool. Most of my sales are direct at the website. So maybe that's through some level of SEO. Obviously, the in person markets are where most of my customers come from. So I'm looking at some additional other channels, exploring, just trying to see what's the right fit.
Hmm.
Also, I'm building some muscle to begin to look at some niches. So um, and I heard this at an in-person market at this suggestion. I'm going to try it out. So stay tuned. But hotel gift shops, hospital gift shops, just kind of looking at those small little niches.
Nice. So yeah, bigger
Mhm.
distribution.
Yeah.
Okay. Biggest challenge for the rest of the year.
Oh gosh, getting it all done. I would say um, it's a constant reminder that this is my business.
Hmm.
Right. And it's so easy to slip back into that corporate mode where I feel like I've got to work 40 hours a week. Not that there's anything wrong with working, but that I have to kind of fit in this mold, and that no, I created this business so I can have the life I want. And so to answer your question about the biggest challenges, Q4 is usually it's particularly toward the end. It's very family focused and centric, which is beautiful, but that kind of flies in the face if you want, those big Q4 sales. So just being able to get ahead of it and plan wisely, because I don't want to be at a point where I hate my business.
So the last podcast guest that I talked to said something that really struck me. I mean, she said a lot that really struck me, but one was, and I really struggle with this as well, the idea of work-life balance.
Yeah.
She retermed it in work-life harmony. Sometimes it's this way, sometimes it's that way, but being in harmony with what
Yes.
your, 24 hours looks like
Yes.
is something that I've been thinking about for the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
Um, what are you most excited about for the rest of the year?
Oh my gosh. Well, I love the markets. I do. I love the markets. I've got my ladies that stop by and they're like, "Oh, you're back." Yeah, I'm back. So so I got my ladies that stop by doing that. My husband now comes to the markets with me. And
Nice.
so, yeah, I'm like, "Okay, you're ready to do this together?" So he comes. So it's almost kind of like a weird family affair, kind of quasi tailgating. I don't know, but but I enjoy that. I enjoy doing that, interfacing. The weather is going to be, especially down here in Georgia, a bit fairer than other parts of the country. So just being able to get out and meet people, I love doing that.
Wonderful. All right. Three next questions. What is your biggest success to date?
Honestly, it's I would say doing this business. I never thought, first of all, that I would leave corporate America. I I was planning to follow the path of retiring, in that job, being at some level and following that path. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that path. It just wasn't the path that was for me. And just being able to make such a hard pivot,
Hmm.
I just didn't think if you would have asked me 5, 10 years ago, are leave? Are you going to start a clothing line? Do a leak proof panty business? I would have never thought that. But just being able to do it and find my rhythm in it and get comfortable with it and embrace this new life, I'm just proud of that. And my kids are just like, wow, mom, you're doing it. So, that's also great too, being able to be an example to them.
On the flip side of that, what would you consider to be your biggest failure to date?
Oh gosh, I would say I struggle with the perfectionism,
Mm,
meaning it's got to be right. It's got to be right. I believe I spent way too much time, even with the website, we talked about that. I spent way too much time trying to fine tune that website instead of just launching it.
mm,
And actually, it was a friend who said, "Girl, you better take that passcode off of that thing and, make that website live." And I was like, "Oh,
right,
really?" So because I was waiting for some perfect moment. And I'm
right.
realizing that I have a tendency of doing that.
Mm,
And, I kind of alluded to it with the emails. It's got to be a perfect email before I send it out. That product's got to be perfect. That table, the first time I did a show, an event, that table had to be perfect. So just struggling with that, I don't have to strive for perfection, that, you can get it 80%, 75%. That's
and what
okay.
about the most important lesson you think you've learned to date?
Oh, I go back to old school.
Mm,
Old school marketing works.
mm,
Talking to people, um, one on one. I would say, believe it or not, and I learned this from another website, is rocking your brand. I mean,
mm,
just being out and about and wearing your t-shirt or whatever swag you have that
hmm.
that highlights your brand, doing that, right, going out and letting people ask, say, hey, what is that? You meet people at the market or in the library or wherever you go, and it's like, oh, what is that? And talking about it as opposed to
Hmm.
hiding, because they're not going to
Hmm.
know. Yeah.
All right. And
So being
if
your own
you,
marketer.
yeah, I mean, that what I like. I like a lot. Uh, yeah, rocking your brand. I mean, there's so many articles and books and resources out there that talk about how crucial it is for the founder CEO to be sales. You got to live and breathe sales as
Yeah,
well before you build up your business development arm and team, etc. Sales is on you to get it off the ground, and not
yeah,
everybody, unless you come from that background or it's in your personality. A lot of folk, it's like, oh, I just hire somebody to do that. But no, for so many
mhm,
reasons, one being like the soul and DNA of your company, it's on
exactly.
you. It's
Yep,
you to lead that. So yeah,
yep,
it's a very
yeah,
is a very important point.
yeah.
Um, if you could get 85% of the world to do something, to adopt a single behavior, what would it be?
Well, of course, in the space that I'm in, it's my tagline when I'm at when I meet people is, I say, we're here to normalize reusables,
Hmm.
right? There was once a time, and I tell a lot of the young girls this. There was once a time when our grandmas, our great grandmas, they were using reusables,
Mm. They didn't
right,
have a
for
choice.
everything, but in particular menstrual hygiene
Yeah.
products. They were doing that. And so, now we've got more options, and we've got and we can introduce at least one, whether that's a cup,
Hmm.
whether that's a washable pad, whether that's a panty, just embracing it, not going, 100%, because I get that maybe, most folks aren't there yet. And there's some changes you have to make and to manage that well. But even if it's, hey, I'm home for the day, I'm going to
Right.
use reusables,
Right.
or I may not. For me, when I take a plane ride, I'm using a period panty just because, for obvious reasons.
Right.
I may not be able to have access to a bathroom, so just
Right.
introducing it in small ways, or not being afraid to introducing it
Mm-hmm.
in a small way. I'm telling you, it's life changing. When I meet people who have used other products and they come to my booth, they're like, "Oh my gosh, where has this been all my life?" Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, I I like this product. I like this mission a lot. Um,
yeah.
and can you just plug for us your website, your social handles? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so my website is femdacity.com. So Femdacity. And on Instagram and Twitter, we are at Femdacity. And, as we talked about earlier, Femdacity stands for feminine audacity, because you know what? We can be audacious, and with our choices, whether it's choosing to use reusable products or just how we live our life, right? So, but that's where you'll find me. And you can
Love
email me
it.
at Tanya@femdacity.com.
Nice. Thank you so much for stopping by the
Yeah,
podcast and talking to us
so much
today.
fun talking to you.
Thank you. Like I said, I like this product a lot. I like this mission. I like your language around menstruation should be less of an issue. It's never going to be a non-issue for
Yeah,
menstruating people, but it should be less of an issue. It should definitely
yeah,
be less of a barrier. It should not be a barrier.
exactly.
So really supportive of this mission. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you.
And for everybody else, we will see you on B1.